So, welcome to the New South Wales Family Daycare Association PD in Your Pocket series. My name is Rowena Muir and I'm your facilitator for the evening, and we'll be exploring educational philosophies in family daycare. I've had the pleasure of spending some time in the homes of amazing family daycare educators through my previous work as an authorised officer, as well as talking with educational leaders and coordinators within large and small family daycare schemes. And I really appreciate and value the unique context of this sector and its vital role in the early childhood sector more broadly. And on a personal note, I have fond memories of my own time in family daycare as a child and the memories that I still have to this day. So, as we begin this evening, I'd like to start by saying Yuma. I recognise that we are coming together from many traditional countries this evening, and for me, I am speaking with you from the lands of the Ngunnawal people. And Yuma is the Ngunnawal word for hello. You might like to include a word from the traditional country from where you are joining us from tonight in the chat. And while you do that, I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past and present. And I acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have been educating and caring for children on this land for tens of thousands of years. And I recognise the richness and diversity of these cultures. I also acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us tonight. So, you hopefully have received this booklet as part of the PD in Your Pocket, which is funded by New South Wales Family Daycare Association. So hopefully you have received and had a chance to read the resource booklet. You should have been sent a link to the topic booklet last week. If you didn't receive it, you can find the link on your screen if you're watching this presentation. And if you're listening to it as a podcast, the link is www.newsouthwalesfamilydaycare.org.au/PD in your pocket. And just a reminder about the survey as well that you will be sent after this session. Please take a moment to fill out the survey as it helps to get the necessary funding as well for Family Daycare Association to continue providing this training for free. Thank you to everyone that has also filled in last month's survey. And lastly, your certificates of participation will be emailed to you over the next week. So please make sure to check your junk mail. And if after a week you still have not received your certificate, contact professional services at newsouthwalesfamilydaycare.org.au and they will be able to help you out. So in this session, we will have a think about 3 of the most common child-centred educational philosophies in early childhood education and care, and how these can influence your program and practice. I'm hoping that you will gain some insight and tools to decide on which elements of these approaches you may like to choose to support the development of a tailored, inspiring educational practice that nurtures creativity, self-direction, and holistic growth. I also suspect, though, as we talk more about the key principles of these philosophies, that you may begin to identify the practices already in place in your homes and communities that draw on these concepts. In terms of some housekeeping for this live session, I will be encouraging you to use the chat function to communicate with each other. I will also ask a couple of questions that you might like to answer in the chat as well as we go throughout the webinar. And then at the end of the webinar, though, there will be time for questions and answers, sorry. So I'm certainly not a tech whiz. And tonight I'm joined by a member of the association team, Ethan, who can assist with any tech support you may need. But if all else fails, try leaving and rejoining the meeting. I find that often works for me. Okay, so what did we learn from you? You may remember we asked some questions when you registered for this session. This is what we learned from you. Wrong way. It's terrific. So the first question, was, is your current program influenced by educational philosophies such as Reggio Emilia, Montessori, or Steiner? And it's terrific to see that 41% of you, of your current program is influenced by educational philosophies such as Reggio, Montessori, or Steiner. And 31% are somewhat influenced. 16% of you are unsure, and only 12% of you are not influenced at all by these educational philosophies. So hopefully throughout the webinar tonight, there may be something that you can take away, either from this presentation or from each other in your responses in the chat. So the next question was, how familiar are you with child-centered educational philosophy? And it's interesting to see that 38% of you are somewhat familiar with child-centered educational philosophies. 38% of you are moderately familiar. 19% are very familiar, and 5% are not 100% familiar or not too familiar at all. And then our last question was, which describes your approach to early childhood education? And it's fantastic to see that 44% of you described your approach to early education as creative. 32% of you described it as holistic, and 15% of you described it as structured, and 5% as slow, and 4% of you as another approach as well. I think when I think about my own practice, I probably fit into all of those categories at different times. So thanks again for taking the time to complete that survey as well. Okay, so before we jump into the 3 philosophies or approaches that we are focusing on this evening, let's have a quick think about educational philosophies more broadly and take a moment to perhaps answer this question in the chat. How satisfied do you feel with your current philosophy at the moment? And as you do that, let's start with a quick look at the National Quality Standard, because this reminds us that at the heart of every great program is a clear and meaningful philosophy. This isn't just a formal document. It's a shared vision that reflects the values, beliefs, and priorities of children, families, educators, and the community. It's something we create together with families, ensuring it evolves and stays relevant over time. A strong philosophy aligns with the principles of learning, safety, and well-being, creating a foundation for a nurturing, inclusive, and responsive environment. And most importantly, it celebrates and respects the unique and vital role families play in their children's growth and learning. The philosophy is what shapes our practices and keeps us focused on what truly matters, supporting every child to thrive. So your educational philosophy will also be influenced by your service philosophy. It will reflect your core values and what truly matters to you as an educator. Some elements of your philosophy may focus on the learning environment and how it supports children's growth, while also considering the unique needs of families and the community. Perhaps you're aiming to strike the balance between education and care, drawing inspiration from specific early childhood theories to guide your practices. And we'll hear some great examples of that in our educator interview later in this session. Valuing the role of nature and outdoor play may be an important aspect of your philosophy. Perhaps you have a strong focus on fostering children's social and emotional learning through meaningful connections. Your philosophy might inform your approach to observing and listening closely to children, letting their interests shape your program, and prioritize play-based learning as the foundation for development. And finally, through your philosophy, it may be evident that you embrace lifelong learning, both for yourself and your children, as you continue to grow and adapt as an educator or leader. Some of you may have been involved in the development of your service philosophy, and others may not. Or perhaps some of you would like to create your own for your home environment. Before we look specifically at child-centered educational philosophies, let's take a moment to consider three aspects of a meaningful philosophy, which can be applied to both a service philosophy and an educational philosophy, which we will look at more closely on the next slide. First, it's about having a clear vision for learning and development, an understanding of what you want to nurture in the children that you care for, and how you'll guide their growth. Second, it's grounded in values and relationships, highlighting the importance of building strong connections with children, families, and the community. And finally, the role of the environment can't be overlooked. A thoughtful, well-prepared space sets the stage for exploration, discovery, and learning. Together, these elements create a strong foundation for a philosophy that truly supports every child to thrive. So, what exactly is a child-centered educational philosophy? An educational philosophy and a service philosophy are really closely connected, but serve two different purposes. Think of them as two pieces of the same puzzle. One focuses on how children learn, while the other shapes the overall identity and values of the service. The educational philosophy is the how of teaching and learning, and it's like a guiding compass for teaching and learning. It's building on research, theories, and core beliefs about how children develop and engage in the world around them. Its focus is on how children learn and grow, and its purpose shapes curriculum, teaching methods, and educated child interactions. And it might be influenced by educational thinkers like Piaget, Vygotsky, Montessori, and the Reggio Emilia approach. For example, we believe children are active participants in their own learning and thrive through play, inquiry, and meaningful social interactions. This philosophy drives decisions about pedagogy, curriculum planning, and how children's progress is assessed. Now let's have a look at service philosophy. This is the why behind the service. Service philosophy takes a broader view. It defines the values, vision, and overall purpose of the early childhood service or family daycare scheme. It's about more than just education. It includes relationships, community, inclusion, and how the service operates as a whole. Its focus is on identity and values of the service, and its purpose is on guiding decision making around things like service culture and interactions with families and educators, as well as the wider community. And it might be influenced by the National Quality Framework or the Early Years Learning Framework or My Time, Our Place, depending on the age of the children that you are educating and caring for. It may also be influenced by the community needs and different ethical practices as well. So, for example, we are committed to providing a safe, inclusive, and nurturing environment where children, families, and educators collaborate and foster lifelong learning. That's an example of a philosophical statement for the service. So, how they work together. Think of the service philosophy as the big picture vision of an early childhood setting, while the educational philosophy details the how learning happens within that vision. When these two align, they create a cohesive and meaningful environment where children, families, and educators thrive. Let's take a moment to reflect. If you're an educator and feel comfortable to share in the chat, what do you hope children and families feel when they enter your home? Or if you are a coordinator, perhaps you could share with the other participants here tonight what values and cultural perspectives are important to you. And how do you incorporate these into your work with educators, children, and families? I've included a few other questions on this slide for you to consider after this session with a view to help you continue to develop and refine your own philosophies and building on what you already do or what you might learn through through this session and from each other in the chat this evening. These questions include, what do I believe about how children learn best? And how can and how can my home environment support this? How will I balance care routines with learning experiences to create a holistic environment for children? And how will I stay positive to each child's needs and interests and voices in my approach? There are some questions you might like to take away to think about. As an introduction into what we will be looking at more closely tonight, I have included a bit of a comparison table, as I suspect some of you may already have these practices underway. We have also included emergent curriculum here, as I know this is an approach that many of you may be drawing on already. I'm not going to speak to this table too much because as we process through this session, you will begin to see some of these similarities. For example, if we start on the top row, when we consider philosophy in general, elements of learning and development are highlighted, such as child-led, self-paced, inquiry-based, collaborative, holistic, and emerging from interest are a few of the examples. The second row highlight the view of the child from each of these philosophical approaches as a capable, independent, curious, competent, spiritual, and active participant. Many of these, I'm sure, sound familiar to you from your engagement with the Early Years Learning Framework or My Time, Our Place. And lastly, the third row. This highlights the role of the educator and includes elements such as a facilitator, a co-researcher, an observer, or a storyteller. So let to help focus our thinking on educational philosophies, I thought I'd share these three main reasons why a child-centered educational philosophies are so well suited to family daycare. Firstly, small group sizes. The philosophies we are looking at tonight focus on individual learning and work well in small home-based settings. Secondly, are mixed age groups. These encourage collaborative learning with older children guiding younger ones. And lastly is personalised learning. As you know, educators in family daycare can and often do create individual plans based on each child's interests, strength, development, and so on. Now, before we look at our first philosophy, I'd just like to give you a quick reminder that this webinar is not suggesting that you adopt one or all of these philosophies. Instead, it's an invitation for you to explore them, reflect on their relevance within the context of your setting, and consider what would support your practice, your children and families. You might like to choose some elements from one or more approaches. Many educators combine elements from multiple philosophies to create a balanced, child-centered approach. Here on the slide are some of the steps you could take depending on where you are in your journey. You'll also hear some great advice through our educator interview later in the webinar, and the booklet also includes some steps on how to get started or where to go next. So looking at this slide, the first suggestion that we have here is to reflect on and review your philosophy. Number two is to explore or research educational philosophies. Number three is to identify what aspects of your current approach align with these philosophies. And you might start to do this evening. Number four is to consider the context of your service. That is essential. And when we think about that context, we need to consider your children, your families, and your community, because all of our contexts are very, very different. And number five, you might like to choose an element or elements of one or more of the philosophies that, again, aligns with your service context. Okay, now we're going to briefly touch on our three focus philosophies for this evening, starting with the Montessori method. However, before we do, I'd like to give a bit of a disclaimer to say that this session provides a brief overview, not a deep dive into these approaches. So what I have also included at the end are some links for where you can go to get some more information about each of these different philosophies. So our objective in this section for tonight is to understand some of the key principles of the Montessori method and to explore how we could incorporate some of these strategies into our own setting. So this method was developed by Maria Montessori in the early 1900s, and its focus is on self-directed activity, children taking lead in their own learning, hands-on learning through the use of sensory-rich materials, collaborative play, children learning together in mixed age groups. And some of the key principles of the Montessori method include respect for the child and how we allow children to follow their own interests, the prepared environment. So this is setting up a learning space that encourages independence. Then there is auto-education. So children learn best when they actively engage in the world around them. And then we have the role of the adult. The educator is a guide in this philosophy and not a direct instructor. Now, I know that unlike other early childhood settings, you are working with not one, but two approved early learning frameworks. Oh, sorry, approved learning framework. So what I have included here is a quick snapshot of these three key elements of the Montessori method and some of the ways in which they are connected to either the Early Years Learning Framework version 2.0 or My Time, Our Place version 2.0, again, depending on the age range of children that you have. So, for example, self-directed experiences. These align with children being encouraged to take responsibility for their own learning and having a strong sense of identity. Hands-on learning. This promotes physical, cognitive, and emotional development and supports a strong sense of well-being. Then there's collaborative play. And this fosters social skills and community engagement and how children are connecting with and contribute to their world. And as we continue to think about this approach, perhaps you may be able to include additional connections that you can see between this approach and the learning frameworks in the chat as we go. So some things to consider if you're thinking about creating a Montessori-inspired program are the prepared environment. So this is how we organise learning spaces with low shelves, accessible materials, and clearly defined activity areas. Montessori materials are also an important consideration, and these include child-sized tools and materials, encouraging independence and daily routines. And another really important consideration here is observation and how we observe children closely to understand their interests and developmental needs. In the next slide, we'll have more of a look closely at the materials and some examples of Montessori experiences. So let's consider practical life examples first. So these examples include allowing children to practice buttoning clothes, pouring water, sweeping, and so on. Then we have sensorial activities. So examples like this might include providing textured materials, coloured matching games, or sound-based exploration. And these types of experiences are not just limited to the sense of touch, but other senses as well. We can also think about language and literacy through different materials, introducing phonological awareness, games and rhymes, and experiences like tracing sandpaper letters and matching objects. Then we can consider mathematics and how we can use natural materials like sticks or beads for counting or as informal units of measurement, or perhaps colour sorting the pegs as we hang out the washing. I bet some of these already sound familiar to you. Perhaps you're thinking that you might like to understand this approach a bit further. Let's take a moment to answer this question in the chat. So think about if you can identify examples within your own practice that actually already draw on some of these principles. And perhaps your ideas as you offer them into the chat may spark some inspiration for your colleagues here tonight as well. So the role of the educator in the Montessori method is crucial, and it includes the role of being an observer and a guide. This means observing without interruption and stepping in only when needed. And there is a real art to knowing how to do that. It also includes the role of facilitator. This is the approach the educator uses to introduce materials, how they set up the environment, and how they step back to let children take ownership. And lastly, there is the role of modelling behaviour. Through this, educators demonstrate tasks and then allow children to explore independently afterward. I've included some of the benefits on this slide, but it is certainly not an exhaustive list. So some of the benefits include fostering independence, responsibility and self-discipline, developing fine motor skills, and cognitive abilities through hands-on activities, encouraging problem solving and critical thinking, and providing a peaceful, child-led approach to early learning. So in summary, the Montessori method is an adaptable, child-centered approach that fits well with family daycare's intimate, flexible environment. It nurtures self-directed learners and fosters lifelong skills. And I'd like to leave you with this call to action if this approach appeals to you. Begin small with practical life tasks and a prepared environment, and gradually expand the Montessori learning experiences based on the children's interests in your care. Okay, before we move on to the next educational philosophy, let's hear from Julia, our family daycare educator, who's been intentional in how philosophies have impacted her practice. Welcome everyone. I'm joined by an amazing family daycare educator, Julia, today, and we will be having a chat about educational philosophies. So, Julia, could you start by introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about your family daycare service?
Hi, so I'm Julia. My family daycare service is it's a regional centre, but it's still really quite country. So I operate from a residence separate to my home, which we just call the cottage. It's Dandelion Cottage, but we just call it the cottage. So I started in July 2023. All my children are under 3 years of age, so I started with very little babies, and we've just grown up since then. Something I guess, unusual about my service is that you get a free grandma with your experience. So my mum is a DET teacher as well, so she lives a few hours away from me, but when she comes and visits, she just kind of becomes a part of our service and everybody just calls her grandma. So that's really lovely.
That is lovely. It's so great. Community is such an important consideration in our philosophies. So can you share a little about your educational philosophy, particularly with us?
Okay, so I believe that children are the experts of being children. Their work is play, like Maria Montessori said. As an educator, it's my job to provide a safe and nurturing and stimulating environment for the children so that they're safe and happy, and then let them do their work. I think it's important to also know when to step back, as well as so that you actually know when you are invited into their play, and yeah, it's really lovely to be invited into a child's world rather than imposing yourself upon it. Children have a voice. It's our job to listen. Even the smallest of babies can communicate with us, maybe not verbally, but through their body language. It's our job to listen. And each child is an individual with their own needs and their own personalities. And we need to make sure that they're safe and secure so they can be the best versions of themselves that they can. They're so capable. We need to listen to them and let them make decisions about their world.
Fantastic. I love how you talk about how we are being invited into children's play. It can often be a really tricky process to navigate as well, and it's really great to see children just being so central in your thinking. So as we know, developing a philosophy is a journey. Can you walk us through how you created yours?
So to start off with, I really thought about what childhood meant to me and being a child. There's lots of different views out there about, children as sponges or the empty vessel to be filled by the adult learnings, but I really believe that they are born whole and with their own unique personalities and needs and wants. So that really that was my core where I started first. Other influences that I had were my university studies as well. It really made me think about, like, critical reflection. It really made me reflect about what my practices are and how they relate to the big scheme of things in theory, rather than relying on my instincts as a mother as well, which is also a very important part, but it's kind of expanded. I'm not the children's mother, I'm their educator, you know what I mean? I was also really lucky to have a lot of really great mentors throughout the years that have really encouraged me to reflect and think about what education meant to me and really try to encourage me to be true to myself and my values. From there, I went and looked through, I'm an avid avid reader. I went and researched as much as I could and kind of just cherry picked what I could from what resonated with me from different theories. So a couple that really stood out to me was attachment theory. I think children, and it was really important to me as a parent as well, so that kind of brought that into my practice as well. So I think children really need to be safe and secure and responded to. That also ties in with Maslow's hierarchy of needs as well, like they need to be safe and secure. So from there, I did a circle of security course as well, which really brought to me the fact that children need to be safe, yes, but they also need to be free to go out and explore as well. I looked into Waldorf theory and Reggio Emilia, and I took some really lovely things from there as well. Like with Reggio, like I'm not I really liked the idea of educators as co-learners. So we're not the expert, you know, it's all about collaboration, and especially bringing families in as well. Like, you're not just working with the child, it's you know, the whole family unit, which also ties in with Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory, which is the child is the center of ecosystem, and everything they influence their world, and everything influences them, and it's not just a child in isolation, which it's really makes it really important for community ties and stuff like that. So Waldorf education. So I really like that educational environment is very homely, like it's very familiar. Everything throughout the day forms their curriculum. You know, it's I prefer to do real experiences, like we do cooking and clean, you know, like we clean up after our experiences, like that real work. Like when I had my children, I really looked into rye theory as well. That really believes that we need to treat children with respect and don't interrupt them with their play. And so a part of that was really making sure that the play space was safe.
But you've done such amazing deep thinking and reflection on your journey. It's really great. And what was really excited as I was listening to what you were saying was I could see all of these links that we're, you know, going to be talking about in the webinar and things like that. So thank you for also being able to give us those practical examples of that as well, which is it's so helpful when we're thinking about philosophy. Okay, so can you tell me a little bit about now, and you have begun to touch on that as well with the practices, but are there any other ways that you want to talk about the philosophy and how it shapes your day-to-day practice?
So I really went back and had a look at the EYLF and our role. Like in the past, I really thought about education, you know, provocations, keeping them busy, activities everywhere. And I took a step back and I really believe that like care is the most important aspect of education and care. We really need to make sure that the children in our care are safe and secure, because you can't have education without that foundation. And I think a lot of it is just delighting in the children in front of you. Like, just, I think all children need an adult that just thinks they're just amazing, you know, no matter what they do. So that's really kind of the core of what I do. Like, I'm not here to educate me. Like, the children are the centre. So even like down from when I first started my service, like I really thought about what I stood for and how I could communicate that to everyone. So I started with like my logo, like Dandelion Cottage. The reason I chose a dandelion is because dandelions are resilient. You know, they can grow through concrete, and that's you know, what I want to help the children in my care become. Like they need to be strong, capable, happy humans. And also I thought about, you know, children picking dandelions, making wishes, which is the whimsy and the magic of childhood, which I think is really important as well. So that was, and I communicate that. I've got a Facebook page, and so you can look at my Facebook page and just know that's what she's about, because I share messages about who I am and what I stand for constantly. So my service is, I didn't want learning stations. I've got it. It's a cottage that looks like a cottage. Like it's got a couch. It's got a lounge room, dining room, bedroom. It's really homely, but it's also comfortable for adults as well as children. So we've got dining tables that are, a lovely lady actually got it cut down for me. So we've sawn off dining chairs so that adults can sit on them as well, but so can children. And everything, like, I think it's really, somebody told me once that it's really important to, when you're designing areas for children, is to get down at a child level and actually look at what it looks like. So I've been crawling around the cottage a little bit just to see what it looks like. So that, because that's their view, we need to be respectful of that. So I really work hard to make sure that we've got a sense of community at the cottage. So I make sure that all parents know each other and know, who belongs to who. And so another thing that's really important to me is encouraging children to do as much for themselves as they can or want. So I've got, my little toddlers, they carry their lunch boxes to the table, they wipe their faces, they wash their hands, they help me clean up after craft. It's all about helping them to do what they can and want. Like, of course, they're going to want help, and they ask me for help and they get it. So I don't really set up activities for the children. They choose. They have a shelf, and they've got their own little bookshelf that they choose, and they can just flow and do what they need to when they need to, and they know what I've got, so they're very good at asking for what they need. I had an 18-month-old ask me for paper and paint the other day, so that's what we did. It's really important to me to listen to the children and listen to their children's voice and allow them to advocate for themselves. As I said before, a lot of the time I just step back and observe. I won't be digging in the sandpit with them unless they tell me to. Sometimes they do. I tend to kind of support play verbally instead of, getting in the thick of it with them. So from circle security, like I use anchoring, they come to me like, look at me, and I'll say, oh, what, how amazing, and then off they go again, and just kind of that circle of coming in and out. So I encourage them to advocate for themselves. So I use quite a lot of scripts. So when they were little, I used keyword signs. So they would tell me when they were finished, when they needed to eat. Now it's more verbal. So they're telling, they say, for example, I need space, or my turn, waiting, just to communicate what they need. And even with babies, like tiny babies, like I will not pick them up, like just scoop them up. It's you wait for them to be ready to be picked up. You'll notice those sorts of things. So that's really important to me, is that you don't do anything to children without their consent and their knowledge. So I don't have a routine necessarily. I call it a rhythm, more of a rhythm. Like it's flexible to the day, and they'll tell me what they need. We tend to be hobbits a little bit sometimes, that we have second breakfast and 11s, but that's okay. That's what they need. And I have a music degree as well. So music and creativity is really important to me. So I sing all the time. We make up little songs for routines. Like I sang, what did I sing the other day? And the children are taking part as well. Like every time I pick them up to go on the change table, it's up, and down, down. And they, the other day, what did they say? It was, I said, are we ready? Are we ready for bed? And they sang back, no. So, it's really cute.
That is great. That is really good. It's really nice. Actually, I was thinking it's really nice to be able to see those great examples of how you've embedded that philosophy throughout, that it is evident in your day-to-day practice, which is really, really good.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Before we go, I have one last question. What is some advice that you would give to educators who are either developing or revisiting their educational philosophy?
Okay, so start off thinking that image of the child is absolutely essential. Like, you can't make a philosophy if you don't know who you're making the philosophy for. And that could include, what are your values? What would that look like in day-to-day practice? And then gather information and see, you don't have to stick to one thing. You can cherry pick, I like this part out of this resonates with me, that resonates, and then bring it all together. And don't stop learning, don't stop constantly researching. And live and breathe it. You've got to, it's not worth the paper it's written on if it's not your daily practice and a part of who you are and how you operate. That's really important.
Fantastic. Such great advice and important messages as well for everyone to take away and remember. So I just would like to thank you again for sharing and giving your time and again just sharing that journey that you've been through with us today. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Been a little while actually since Julia and I recorded that interview, and it still makes me smile. And it I think I pick up something different each time I've watched it. And what I really love is that she clearly lives and breathes her values through her philosophy and in relation to lots of different things as well. So those beliefs and values come through in relation to how she views children, how she views herself as an early childhood professional, and her community and families, and as well as then the actual educational program and the how she's setting up those environments for children and her role as an educator within that. So I'm pretty sure Julia might be on here tonight at this webinar. So I just want to give her another big shout out for sharing her practice. I just find it really inspirational, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. So if you want to share your love with her in the chat tonight, feel free to drop her a message. I'm sure she would love the encouragement. Okay, so I feel like I need to invite you all to move around as a bit of a brain break as we switch our thinking to the Reggio Emilia approach. And perhaps you can do that while I remind you again that this segment provides just that overview of this approach, and certainly not a deep dive. And once again, at the end of the session, I'll provide you some links of where you can go for further information in relation to this approach. Okay, so this approach was originated in Reggio Emilia in Italy post-World War II and was developed by Loris Malaguzzi. And it focuses on child-led learning. So this is where projects emerge from children's interests. Some of you may refer to that as emergent curriculum as well. Expressive art. So children express their understanding through various art forms. It also focuses on the environment as the third teacher, and this refers to the learning space as a key role in shaping experiences. And I think Julia really articulated some of this thinking and these ideas in her interview just now. Collaboration and community involvement is also another focus. And families and educators and children work as partners in the learning process. Some of the key principles of the Reggio Emilia approach include the image of the child, seeing children as capable, competent, and full of potential. Some of you may think of that language in relation to the early years learning framework, perhaps as well. Another key principle is the 100 languages of children. So that's the way that children express themselves through different languages, such as art, play, storytelling, movement, and so on. And then we have collaboration. So this explains that learning is a shared experience with peers, educators, and also the community contributing. And another key principle is emergent curriculum. So the curriculum is flexible and evolves based on children's interests and their inquiries as well. I wonder how many of you might be drawing on some of these practices in your day-to-day experiences as well. So as with the Montessori method, there is also a clear alignment between the Reggio Emilia approach and the approved learning framework. So, for example, in child-led projects, children take ownership of their own learning through project-based activities, which also helps them develop a strong sense of identity. Then there is expressive arts. So experiences enhance communication skills and creativity, and therefore support children to become effective communicators. and community and the environment. So this emphasises the importance of children being connected with and contributing to their world. The environment as the third teacher means spaces that are designed to be inviting, interactive, and filled with natural materials. The environment also encourages exploration through sensory-rich materials and art mediums. And it includes open-ended provocation, such as setting up materials and experiences that inspire children's creativity and imagination. Family daycare and the Reggio Emilia approach have almost a natural fit in three specific ways. The small group sizes that we talked about previously, this enables personalised, child-centred learning projects. The home-based environment itself provides opportunities to design inviting spaces that use natural materials and open-ended resources, and a strong community connection as well. The approach's emphasis, on involving families and the local community, which aligns well with the intimate relationship of your settings as well. So, some things to consider if you're thinking of setting up a Reggio-inspired program. One consideration would be your environment design. So that would be how you might use lighting in different ways, whether that be ambient lighting through lamps rather than big overhead lighting, or natural lighting through access to different windows of different sizes and things like that. You might also think about the environment design in terms of your open spaces, the use of mirrors, and plants, as well as how you might display children's work at their eye level or perhaps in project books. And then we have materials is another important consideration. So you might provide natural loose parts such as stones, leaves, fabric, and art supplies such as clay, paint, charcoal, that children can use really creatively and that also demonstrate your belief in children as capable and competent. So you will give them those, high quality artistic resources such as charcoal, clay, and paints that people may not always instinctively provide for children. Then there is also documentation as a really important consideration. So you might create visual records of children's projects and progress through photos, journals, and display. And these become part of a learning dialogue between the children, their families, and yourself as well. So some examples of Reggio Emilia inspired experiences could include nature exploration. So when children gather natural materials, they might create something with those. It could be transient art, sculptures or designs that foster this connection to the natural environment. Art as an expression also provides opportunities for children to explore ideas through painting, drawing, or clay sculpting, with a clear focus on the actual process of the experience, not what they're producing at the end, not the product. Storytelling, and also storytelling with loose parts is a really another nice example here. So encouraging children to use loose parts as to create stories or to recreate real life experiences of things that they've perhaps done on the weekend or maybe over the holiday periods as well. And then another important consideration for these types of experiences could be some community projects that you might be involved with. So perhaps children might be involved in small projects that relate to their family or to their pets or to their neighbourhood. And that helps to strengthen their sense of belonging and connection as well. So like with Montessori as well, the role of the educator in Reggio inspired practices is crucial. And it and it includes similarities and differences as well to the Montessori approach. And three key roles that we're going to sort of look at here are the co-researcher. So this is where educators observe and participate in children's learning, helping facilitate inquiry and exploration. We also have the provocateur. So that might be how you introduce provocations, so thoughtful, open-ended questions or materials that inspire curiosity and wonder. Or perhaps your role is that of the documenter, so capturing children's thoughts and their progress in learning through either visual, verbal, or written documentation, or a combination of all three, which then informs future learning. So let's pause for a moment and give you another moment to think about this question in the chat and share your ideas with each other. Do you see yourself in one of these roles? And if so, which one? And maybe why? Or perhaps you can give an example as well. So once again, the points on this slide are certainly not an exhaustive list, but they aim to provide an overview of some of the benefits of this approach. So these include encouraging creative thinking and self-expression through the 100 languages of children. Another benefit is that it promotes social and emotional development by fostering a collaborative, community-orientated approach to learning. Another benefit is that it builds strong relationships between children, families, and educators through shared projects. And another example as well is that it values the home environment as a meaningful context for inquiry and exploration. So in summary, the Reggio Emilia approach encourages creativity, community involvement, and expresses learning. It fits seamlessly into settings where intimate child-led learning can flourish. Now, before we look at our final philosophy, I'd like to leave you with this call to action. If you're interested in Reggio-inspired philosophy, start small by setting a creative space with natural, open-ended materials. And think about how you observe children's interests and let their inquiries shape the future learning experiences. Okay, wow, we're on to our final philosophy for the evening, Waldorf-Steiner education. As with the previous philosophies, please keep in mind that this next segment provides an overview and not a deep dive. The objectives for this section, again, are to understand the core principles of Waldorf education and explore how you may like to implement some of these Waldorf-Steiner-inspired practices within family daycare environments. So, this approach was developed by Rudolf Steiner in 1919, and it focuses on 4 key aspects. One is imaginative play. So play as the cornerstone of early learning. It also focuses on creativity and arts. This includes creative visual arts, music and movement, and how you might integrate these into daily life. It also focuses on holistic development. And this is how you might address the whole child, the body, mind, and spirit. And then it also focuses on rhythm and routine. So it emphasizes predictable daily rhythms that nurture both security and comfort, which is some of the things that I could still think about when I think back on the interview with Julia and some of the inspiration that was coming through what she was explaining. So some of the key principles of Waldorf education include imitation and example. So children learn best through observing adults is what this is explaining, and that mimicking and through mimicking purposeful tasks as well. Another key principle is this concept of imaginative play, particularly through open-ended toys and resources, and using storytelling to help children develop their imagination and creativity. That's a really important aspect of it. Another key principle is rhythm and repetition, as I mentioned a minute ago. And this can sometimes happen through establishing daily, weekly, or also seasonal rhythms that foster this sense of security and balance, which again link nicely to this holistic view of children. Then we have connection to nature. So time outdoors and natural materials are both really, really central to a child's experience in this approach. Another one that sometimes people might be familiar with, sometimes it can be misunderstood, and perhaps an opportunity for more reading and research after this webinar as well. And that is some consideration around delaying what people may call formal academics. So, formal education in reading or writing is generally delayed around around the age of 7, focusing instead on experiential and sensory-rich learning in the early years. But keep in mind that that also still means that children are learning and supporting their oral language and early literacy skills through this play-based and inquiry-based natural learning as well. So some of the ways that Waldorf-Steiner philosophy aligns with the approved learning framework include imaginative play and how this supports emotional and social development, as well as supporting children to develop a strong sense of well-being. Creativity encourages creative thinking and problem-solving skills, and supports children to become confident and involved learners. Holistic development integrates various aspects of a child's growth and learning, enriching their sense of identity as well. And rhythms and routines support children to become effective communicators. So spaces should feel warm, inviting, and home-like. Does that sound like your place? Waldorf environments often use natural materials as well, like wood, wool, silk, and handmade toys. They include open-ended toys as well, or resources, such as blocks, cloths, and figures, encouraging creativity and imaginative play. Just spaces you might need to consider how, you display natural elements, so seasonal tables perhaps with flowers, stones, and leaves, to create this connection to nature and rhythm. And a few ways that it's a really nice complementary fit to family daycare schemes as well, settings, sorry. The home-like settings. So Waldorf really focuses on this idea of a natural home-like environment, and which aligns perfectly with the intimate home-based care in your settings. The other reason it's a really nice complementary fit is around imaginative play. So your homes can really provide space to allow for small, creative play environments that can change daily or weekly, or keeping the experiences fresh and dynamic as children's interests grow and develop as well. And also close relationships. So the Waldorf-Steiner philosophy really has a strong emphasis, on human connection, and this imitation thrives in the personal and small group dynamic of a family daycare environment as well. Some aspects that you might like to consider if you are thinking about or creating a Waldorf-Steiner program, or perhaps you might already do as we go through some of these points. They include daily rhythm. So again, we heard Julia speak about how she doesn't necessarily have a routine of the day, but she has a rhythm that sort of naturally unfolds throughout the day. So when we think about that in relation to this approach, it is about establishing a bit of a predictable schedule that includes time for free play, but also creative activities, outdoor time, And then you've, of course, got meals and rest incorporated into that as well. And also how we might consider incorporating different seasonal changes and festivals, perhaps even into the rhythm as well. Another really important consideration here are natural materials. So this might be how providing toys or resources or materials, particularly that are made from wood or wool or cloth or other natural fibers. Perhaps you can even add in the chat some other natural materials and fibers that you think that you could draw on. And these materials tend to avoid that, plastic or synthetic materials as well, focusing on items that people might describe as warm or sensory rich as well. Then another important consideration here is creative arts and crafts. So integrating simple arts and crafts using things like beeswax, high quality crayons, natural paints, and even handcrafts like knitting or felting as well are really some great examples from the Steiner Waldorf experiences too. And then the last consideration I was going to give today was around music and movement. So how you might include daily singing, dancing, rhythmic games and storytellings as a really core part of the day, and perhaps you using them to support your rhythm of the day as it progresses as well. Some other examples of Waldorf Steiner experiences also include nature walks and outdoor play. So daily outdoor time where children explore nature and collect items like stones and leaves. So you might even go to wild spaces, outside of your backyard or outside of the local park. And also how children engage in open-ended imaginative outdoor play as well is a really nice way to think about learning experiences in this approach. Another aspect is around seasonal crafting. So activities that celebrate the season, because again, if you think about the focus of the philosophy and some of these key principles, there is a really strong connection to the seasons and how they influence who we are and our sense of being. So some examples that I've come across working with Steiner settings, when they've made lanterns for autumn, they might make wreaths in springtime or even nature crowns in summer. And I've seen children of lots of different ages actually really enjoy engaging with those learning experiences. Another type of learning experience in this approach is storytelling and puppetry. So again, really great experiences for oral language and early literacy skills too. Simple puppet shows using handmade cloth dolls and natural elements to act out stories. And again, children can often make their own puppets and play along as part of this. And then we also have handcrafts as a different type of learning experience as well. So this idea of introducing really simple, again, depending on the age of the children that you have, handwork activities like finger knitting, beeswax modeling, or watercolor painting. And I've really seen, obviously, educators are adapting and introducing these in different ways based on the children's age and their stage and their interest level and things like that. But it's a really great way again for children to be engaging in their learning and to express what perhaps they might know, think or do as well. So let's pause again for our last question to answer in the chat and see if you can see a connection between perhaps some of these examples that we've been discussing in your current practice, or you may think of some other examples as well. So nice seeing so much engagement in the chat. I wish I had time to read it all, but I am looking forward at the end of the session to be able to, answer questions hopefully that you have, or to perhaps be able to point you in the right direction. Okay, so let's think now about your role in education in this philosophy as well. So There are three main roles of the educator in Waldorf education. One is modelling. So the educator acts as a role model for children, performing purposeful tasks such as cooking, gardening, or handwork, while children observe or handwork while children observe or join. And I can think of some of those examples that came through as well in the interview with Julia, and also as we talked about some of these other philosophies where we talked about practical life tasks and skills, which are often something that we're drawing on within family daycare settings as well. Another role is around storytelling and oral tradition. So this is using these methods such as oral storytelling, not just reading a book, but actually storytelling. And there's a difference there. As well as finger plays and nursery rhymes, instead of necessarily screen-based stories as well. And encouraging children to participate in retelling stories. And then we also have an important role around craftsmanship. So creating this atmosphere where children see adults engaging in meaningful tasks and meaningful work, and which also inspires them to join in or to be creative, as well as hands-on experiences, some of which we just discussed as well. So some benefits of Waldorf Steiner education include, and again, this is not an exhaustive list, holistic growth. So this focus on physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being of the child, creativity and imagination, children developing this creative thinking and problem-solving skills through open-ended imaginative play. Another benefit is in relation to this idea of rhythm and security. So predictable daily rhythms that provide children with comfort and structure as well. And then another key benefit is this idea of this connection to nature and nature-based play for learning that fosters a really lifelong appreciation of the environment, and which obviously leads on to other things for another webinar to discuss. So in summary, Waldorf education encourages holistic, imaginative, and nature-connected learning, which fits beautifully with the family daycare model. By creating rhythmic, nature-based environments, educators can nurture children's growth in body, mind, and spirit. Before we recap on the similarities and differences of those three philosophies, I'll leave you with this call to action if you are considering adopting a Waldorf Steiner approach. Begin by incorporating perhaps natural materials or predictable rhythm for your day, or daily creative experiences. How could you do that if you don't already do that within your program? Okay, we've covered so much, and I really thank you for, staying on. I know it's the end of a long day for many of you who've also been working all day with children. So let's just, before we go though, recap these philosophies, starting with similarities. So some of the similarities that I can see, and hopefully you can see as well as we've sort of explored them, is around this child-centered learning. So all three philosophies emphasize respecting the child as an active participant in their own learning, allowing for self-directed exploration. The next similarity is holistic development. So each approach in different ways, though, has nurtured cognitive, social, emotional, and physical development rather than focusing solely on academics. Then there's also hands-on or experiential learning. So Montessori, Reggio Emilia, and Steiner all prioritize learning through direct experiences, albeit in different ways, but also using sensory-rich, practical, and creative activities. Another similarity is the strong role of the environment. So learning environments are carefully designed with natural materials and inviting spaces and opportunities for children to explore. Then we also have our final similarity is this emphasis on creativity and imagination. So each philosophy, again, in different ways, really has valued creative expression through art, storytelling, and open-ended materials, allowing children to communicate their ideas in multiple ways. But there are also some key differences too, as we would expect. So one is around a structured approach to learning, or the structure and the actual approach to learning, I should say. So perhaps, you know, if we think about Montessori, there is perhaps a little bit more structure, and there's a sequential aspect to learning within the prepared environment and through the self-correcting materials as well. Whereas the Reggio Emilia approach was more emergent, more project-based learning that was guided by children's interests. And the Steiner approach was more rhythmic, teacher-led also, approach with a focus on storytelling, art, and the delayed of formal, perhaps what some might say, formal academic. Okay, another key difference is around that role of the educator. So in the Montessori approach, this role of the educator was more as a guide or a facilitator, observing and directing children to appropriate materials. Whereas the Reggio approach, there was the role of an educator as a co-researcher, documenter, working alongside children in an inquiry-based learning. And in Steiner, there was this role of the educator as being a storyteller, modeling and emphasizing imitation and oral traditions as well. There were also some differences, and again similarities, but also differences around the use of materials and resources. Montessori specifically designed self-correcting materials with a focus on practical life skills. Reggio Emilia has a particular focus around loose parts, natural and open-ended materials for creativity and discovery. And Steiner has a particular focus on handmade natural materials and avoids plastic or overly structured tools as well. There are also some differences in relation to how they approach literacy and numeracy. So Montessori introduced early through hands-on materials and phonics-based learning. The Reggio approach emerges naturally through projects and real-life experiences. And Steiner, again, delaying this concept of formal academics until around the age of 7, with the early years focus on storytelling and imaginative play, is probably a key difference as well. And then we also have this connection to nature and routine. And again, there are lots of similarities, some differences as well. So Montessori encourages this real world experiences, but does not strictly follow a natural rhythm. Whereas Reggio Emilia encourages outdoor exploration, but integrates it within project-based learning. And the Steiner-Waldorf approach deeply embeds is deeply embedded in nature-based rhythms, seasonal festivals, and predictable daily routines and rhythms as well. So Montessori, Reggio Emilia, and Steiner each offer valuable approaches, and selecting which elements to incorporate into your program and practice depends on your own philosophy, the context of your service or your setting, your children, and your families. And drawing from different educational philosophies can enrich your practice and support the development of a quality program. You don't need to strictly follow one philosophy. Instead, you could create a blend or a hybrid approach by thoughtfully selecting elements of these philosophies that you can create a learning environment that nurtures independence, creativity, and holistic development, and that it reflects your values and beliefs as well. Remember to continuously reflect and adapt. Observe what works well for you and your children. Document their learning and gather feedback from them and your families, and adjust your approach based on these observations. As I mentioned throughout this webinar, I have provided an overview, a really broad overview of these educational philosophies. And I'm hoping as well that what you can take away is that having an educational philosophy, a clear educational philosophy, is going to inform your practice. And it may be made up of one of these or many of these or different things as well that you draw on as well. And all of that is important. If one or more of these, though, appeal to you, one of these educational philosophies, if they appeal to you tonight or made you wonder or made you question your practice, you can find out more through the links on your screen. These are also available in the booklet for this topic as well. So the first one I've included here is the Reggio Emilia Australia Information Exchange, and it's a national reference organisation for the educational project of Reggio Emilia in Australia and an invited member of the Reggio Emilia International Network. I've also included a link to Steiner Education Australia. It is a national association and peak body representing 51 Steiner schools and 16 associated members throughout the states and territories of Australia. And each organisation is independent with Steiner Education Australia, providing a national voice to promote and support Steiner education across the country. I've also included a link here to Montessori Australia. They are in the process of updating their website, so you have to keep track of that. And it's the leading national organisation dedicated to promoting and advancing the Montessori philosophy and education system in Australia. They support a whole of life approach as well, sharing how Montessori principles can support independence and self-esteem from birth all the way through to the elderly. I've also really importantly included a link to some of the SEQA resources. They have so many, freely available information sheets on their website. This one in particular is helpful and practical information in relation to reviewing your service philosophy, which then also may inform your educational philosophy. And lastly, I also really encourage you to read particularly page 314, I know that's very precise, of the Guide to the National Quality Framework. And this section specifically addresses Standard 7.1, which aims to achieve, and it talks about the aims. And it aims also to achieve, though, this idea and the importance of philosophy. And it also provides some really great examples of what authorised officers might observe or discuss or cite during their assessment and rating visit. So before we wrap up, we do have some time for some questions. And if there are any questions that we can't get to or that we don't have time to, or that we need to find out some more information about, we will get back to you. But if you do have a question, you can pop it in the chat. I'm going to have a look and see what I can see at this very moment. I am very grateful for this lovely information. This praise that's been put in the chat. I can't seem to see any questions, but I know that I've also can see though that you guys have been giving some great advice to each other as well throughout the chat, which is excellent. I think one of the best things about this program that PD in Your Pocket is supporting is this idea of a community of practice, a community of learners, and it's clear that you're all learning so much from each other. Okay, I'm just having one last chat before we go. I don't think we've got any questions. So on that note, I think we might even wrap up. Before we go, I think I've got one last slide I need to share with you. Just remember that you can, I'll just close this, sorry. That you can participate in the Facebook group as well. So if you haven't already joined, and if you are on Facebook, you might like to open your Facebook and type in PD in your pocket. I know I've been doing that, and it's so great to see the information coming through those channels as well. So thank you everyone for participating in the session tonight. I really appreciate all your time, and thank you for watching and listening to this session. Bye now.
Thanks for participating in this episode of PD in Your Pocket. This series was produced on the lands of the Wangal and Gadigal peoples. If you'd like to watch or listen to other episodes in this series, or find out more information about this program, you can find us at our website at nswfdc.org.au/PD in your pocket.